Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Today is part 5 of a series going back through all the previous episodes back in the good old days and finding some of the best moments and conversations that we've had from episodes number 44 through 48. There's some really good conversation in here, so I'm stoked to share these episode highlights with you guys. Hope you enjoy. Shout out to all these amazing guests for joining these episodes. Much love to all of you. Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and without wasting any time, let's jump into the first episode, number 46, with the Sylvia Massy. Shout out to you, Sylvia. She's amazing, so check her out if you haven't heard of her already, which most of you probably have. Yeah, so episode 46. Their one microphone, I don't know exactly what, I think it's the Spirit.
Yeah.
It's called the Spirit. Yeah, that thing, I A-B'd that against U87, and I liked it better.
I know, right?
For male vocals.
But they're built like tanks. I do adventure recording. It's something that I do where I'll take a client out and do something really wacky and wonderful with them in recording. And so for this artist Hydroform, we took one of the Aston mics and got a bunch of tannerite, and we wanted to record the sound of a cannon blowing up, like a cannon shot.
Yeah.
So we got a big metal barrel, we loaded the tannerite in it, put the mic down in it, the Aston, and blew it up. I mean, it was, we had to go like a quarter mile away just to get out of the fire, and it recorded it great, and there wasn't a scratch on the mic.
That's wild. That's crazy. I would say, like, you're well known for just doing crazy stunts like that with all kinds of stuff, like recording castles and icebergs and caves and all kinds of crazy stuff. Would you say that was like one of the most out of the box things you've recorded? Because that sounds pretty intense.
Well, that was fun, but there's so many things last year I recorded a band in a 3,000-year-old Etruscan tomb, outside of Rome. That was pretty intense. That's
awesome.
There was bats. One of my other favorite ones. There's a couple other favorite ones. I did a recording in a nuclear cooling tower at Satsop, which was.
I saw that.
That came out great too. The recording is. You never know when you do weird things like this if it's going to work out or not.
Oh, totally.
And another one was in the London Underground in a subway, an abandoned subway station called Aldwych. We set up a band called Goddamn and recorded the drums and guitar and vocals down there, and it came out great. And we used it on the final album. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've thrown guitars off of cliffs and some, with distinct results. Which is unfortunate because destroy a guitar and then you got nothing really great to show for it.
No, that's awesome. It's like an episode of Mythbusters. If you throw a guitar or off of a cliff, is it going to sound better or not? We don't know. Sylvia Massy edition. No, one of my favorite hi-hats I ever recorded was a duck in my backyard.
Oh!
And it turned out really nice. Put an OTT on it and just some EQ and delay. It was nice.
Did you play the duck, or was it a natural duck? I mean,
no, it was a natural duck. Yeah, there was a bunch of them in my backyard just hanging out, and I just hung a microphone off the back of my balcony and just kind of let it go, and I got a good quack, and then I just kind of threw that in a drum rack in Ableton Live and compressed it. It was nice. It was good.
I've played a chicken before because you can take a chicken and mic the chicken and then squeeze the chicken at a certain part in the song, and it will. It's like a chicken solo.
Yeah. And you have that really great graphic on how to mic a chicken.
Because I know from experience how to mic a chicken.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely a rare art skill. There's not a lot of people out there who know how to properly mic those. How did you get started with the whole audio engineering thing? Like, where did that start with you?
I was a big music fan growing up, and then college radio was my escape from schoolwork, basically, in college. So I would hang out at the station, and then I got my own on-air time slot, and I would play my favorite music. But then I started getting into the commercial aspect of, actually getting a job in commercial radio. And I did get several commercial jobs, and it kind of takes the fun out of it because it's not about music. It's about advertising. So I did learn how to use all the equipment in the production studio for the radio stations that I worked at. And through that, I was able to do my own music. And then that turned out well enough that other people started hiring me to record their projects too. So that's kind of how I started, is just a kind of a grassroots thing. There weren't really schools when I started out. So there were broadcast courses, but there was not a recording program at any university when I was starting out. So that's how I started. I jumped into recording in San Francisco at commercial studios there, doing music recording. And I had some success to the point where I decided if I really wanted to make it, I'd had to go to LA. So I moved to Los Angeles and basically had to start over, and eventually got a job in a really quite well-equipped studio called Larrabee Sound. And that's where I connected with Rick Rubin and Prince. I worked with Prince there for 3 years. Really got connected into the industry there, then leapt off of that into my own productions, which started with Tool, which was a local band. There was a big scene there in LA for a while with Rage Against the Machine and Tool and a bunch of great bands.
Yeah, all these small bands. It turned out they did okay for themselves. Are you like mostly always analog, or do you find that you like to dabble in the software side too when it comes to emulations for even microphones or just like plugins for mixing? Like, where's that balance for you?
I do quite a bit of hybrid recording and mixing. In particular, with mixing, I will incorporate plugins. And the first is that I replaced my hardware with have been the reverb plugins. As soon as the technology was good enough that I could put away, the boxes in my rack, I'm very, very happy with Valhalla reverbs. There's a whole suite of reverbs with Valhalla that I use in my mixes. I still will sum the basically stems. Well, I'll sum all those stems out of the box through a summing mixer. So I do use analog in that sense, and that will help with the kind of the mushing it all together at the final stage of the mix. So I'm still using analog in that way. I find that my recording has not changed as much because of the plugins. I don't use plugins in recording at all, except for monitoring with reverb. I will always use hardware compression if I'm going to use a compressor on a mic. I use hardware, my preamplifiers, and I tend to gravitate towards the vintage Neve mic preamplifiers. I'll EQ on the way in and commit. And I'm still of the idea that it's much better to commit and to kind of pre-mix as you're recording, so you know what you're going to get at the end, instead of collecting data, which I think a lot of people do. I do have mics that I use with software emulations, but I prefer to choose the microphone that's suited for the effect I'm trying to get. And that's where the fun with all these vintage mics comes in, because if I want to get an old-timey sound, I know I'll pick a particular mic that will give me that kind of effect instead of trying to emulate it later. I can't change things after they've been committed, but that might be a good thing. I think one of the most important things to remember in production is that you're really not a producer unless you finish something.
So this next episode is number 44 with the Electronic Creatives team. They do a lot of playback engineering, and this is with Laura Escude, Greg, and AJ. I've included more info about all of these guests in the show notes, so click those links if you want to connect with them or learn more about these people. Highly recommend, give them a follow, support them, all that good stuff. But yeah, this is episode number 44 with Laura, AJ, and Greg. I also know that a big part of what you guys do is building rigs that are custom to the artist's needs. Redundancy is a big part of that, which I learned from you guys last year. Maybe you can share in your own words what that means. Because anybody can just use Ableton, right, to play back a couple clips, but you guys have a whole process that's really unique to what you do.
So the years that Laura had working with Kanye and all the other shows, since then we've even further developed a lot of workflow and techniques to come up with, a series of designs essentially that we stand by and that take what seems very simple, the playing back of music, right? Which turns out to be actually a totally complex process that's the culmination of everything you learn in recording and basic audio engineering and session production. And it really culminates all those things together. The stakes are higher, obviously, in a live show scenario. So you have to be able to rely on kind of tried and true session and technical techniques. And a big aspect of that is what you mentioned, which is redundancy, which is basically two of everything. Right. Where should one computer or session fail, we have an instantaneous and imperceptible switch over to the second system, the backup system. That's a big part of what is going on behind the scenes for all these big shows, so that you're not just flying depending on one laptop's ability to perform perfectly every night. There's actually a backup system there. So
yeah, well,
there's some secrets behind that.
The secret sauce.
We know.
Yeah. I learned a lot from MasterTrack with a lot of that workflow. It's really cool.
Working with sometimes, very particular artists or their MDs, their music directors that are creative directing the project, right? Or basically breathing down your neck, expecting you to, not only do what they're asking you to do, but do the next thing they're thinking about asking you to do, or be ready to do it before the artist comes in or before it's time to run the song next. You're pretty much in that producer position, but it's in the live context. And then in the live context, there's the pressure to do things timely and quickly and have them sound right, and then be cool and be fun to talk to at the water cooler after that.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
I want to add to that, the communication is the most important thing. As AJ was saying, an artist or a musical director will come up to you, say, hey, we want to change all these things, and it's 100% locked. Then the artist will come in and say, what is this? Like, this is different from what it was yesterday, and this isn't what I was envisioning. And then you have to revert back to an old session, or then you realize, oh shoot, I didn't actually future-proof myself, so I got to re-edit it together. There's all different kinds of scenarios, not to mention the lighting in the video is all tied to our sessions as well. Yeah. So there's just a lot to consider, because once you start making edits, then it's going to affect lighting and video, and then you have to communicate that change to them and allow them the time to reprogram what they've done. Yeah. So it's a lot of communication, and some people, it breaks down a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there was two things that Laura, you said a lot at MasterTrack last summer, and one was stay in your lane. I think that kind of goes a lot to what you just said, Greg, as far as you have the MD, production director, you've got all these different people trying to pull off this big show, and it's focus on what you need to do to keep that show great.
Yeah, play your part. One of the biggest misconceptions that maybe a fan can make is that an artist is doing all this by herself or by himself. And it's no, there's a team not only of in charge of an artist's brand or in charge of the artist's sort of day-to-day affairs. That's one team. Then you have the live team who is in charge of everything sonically for the tour, for the production. And that's 20 to 30 people, maybe even more, big tours, it's 100 people. So you got to know who everyone is. You have to know who you are, and you have to know how to play your part to make sure that this, colossus of everyone working together can walk and live and breathe as its own kind of entity.
Yeah, totally. You're going to say something, AJ, I think.
Oh yeah. I was you had me thinking, because Greg, you talked about being the epicenter of all these different things. And in a kind of organizational sense, when you look at the way tours are run, that's pretty literal, because all our connections and relationships are typically coming from artists themselves or the MD or possibly the production manager with that has a history with that specific artist. In other words, we are hired by the team that wants us there for the musical aspects we bring. We're not there hired by the same people that hire the audio crew, or we're not exactly part of the band, but we're also not exactly part of the production. We really exist between production, band, crew in a way that connects them all, but kind of leaves you as an intermediary between them. For a lot of us on EC, that's ideal because, you know, you're not slotted in with the crew to where your responsibilities are largely physical and technical. You know, you really are in on the music, and you debatably should know the music better than anyone else. You're not part of the band to where, although sometimes you are, depending on the gig.
Right.
You could be operating playback from stage, but you have responsibilities outside of that, and you don't, you know, you're not just kind of lumped into maybe just the guitar player role or the keys player role. Like you are kind of at the core of the musical production in that sense too. And then of course you're not part of the production. You're not there managing anyone's schedule or doing too much administrative work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting kind of Venn diagram to look at, because playback ends up in the center.
Yeah.
And maybe you had this realization too, that actually it's something you've been training for your whole life. Like that was how I felt, realizing like, hey, starting to play piano when I was 5, like training my ear back then, like that helps me pick out keys very quickly and sing back melodies or reference arrangement and chordal structure in a way that totally comes into play. Like the band side that I peer into when in the playback position recognizes that. But then the audio crew side recognizes, hey, I can also tell you, you know, what a balanced cable is or whatever, you know. And that the education on that began when I started messing around in studios when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
It all comes into play. But what's funny is that there's not really any educational institutions that know how playback is working in the now in 2020 and then we're in a new decade. Like we didn't really learn this at Berkeley, you know what I mean? Although there were hints. So that's what makes it interesting, is it all culminates.
Right. Yeah, and like you were saying, there's a lot of different hats you can wear as a playback engineer. Hey, before we jump into the next episode, I wanted to let you know this episode is sponsored by Genki. Genki is loved by producers and composers all over the world. They make Wave, which is a ring that lets you control sound, shape effects, and send commands using the motion of your hand. So it's just like wearing a ring, but it's like 100 times cooler. And you can map it to a lot of different things. I've mapped it to Live's auto filter. It also comes with its own standalone app where you can really dial in the parameters and control the CC values. There's so much you could do with it, and it's endless possibilities. If you want to play a kick drum with your finger, you can literally tap any surface. There's so much more to that as well. So check it out. They were kind enough to give us a discount code. If you want 20% off of their Wave ring, then use the code LiveProducers. That's LiveProducers. Save some money, save your piggy bank, and check out this incredibly versatile tool to automate your workflow and performance. If you want to learn more, check out the link in the show notes or go to genkiinstruments.com. That's GENKI instruments.com. And you can go check out the link in the show notes to get that quick discount. This next episode is episode 45 with Azuki. She's a DJ producer, also works with Brave, makes really cool Max for Live devices and all that good stuff. So check it out.
But kind of the side passions I have are making music, DJing, and generally trying to make people's lives, musicians' lives easier through technology. There's a couple areas where, you know, things could be greatly improved.
As I saw you made a video on how to hack an Ableton Live set and throw it into Rekordbox using a script with a software called Python, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have not been doing stuff in music for very long, like maybe since 2017 or 18. So
Really?
I consider myself like a huge noob in this world. Part of what I've been focusing on in the last 6 months or so is just figuring out ways to use programming to make the music workflow easier for people, including myself. But I try to give away all the tools I make for free, so anyone can use them.
This is like, music's not new for you. Like, you grew up playing, was it flute? Like, you were
piccolo,
a flutist or a flautist or whatever it's called.
I guess.
Yeah.
So my live setup right now is really boring. It's just, if I'm DJing, it's mainly I just use CDJs because it's easy, and like just all you have to do is carry a USB stick.
That's nice.
I have been doing more like set preparation in Ableton, like making edits of things and then copying that in a record box. But yeah, so I guess I switched from DJing in Ableton, which is what I did for like my first year of DJing, into using record box and CDJs this past summer. And that's actually what inspired me to make the script that converts Ableton cues into record box cues, because I had like hundreds of tracks and I wanted to move them all to record box, but like all my cue points were in Ableton. So I actually did this by hand and it took a couple of weeks, but later I realized like, with some basic programming, you can just write a script to do it in like a few seconds. So
that's awesome.
I guess you can technically do a back-to-back set in Ableton if you use like the Ableton, I think it's called Link or something. Never actually used it.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, people don't, for some reason, like don't really perform doing that. Like they prefer CDJs. So.
For sure. Yeah, it's the convenience. It was funny. I remember I showed up a pretty popular up and coming club in Indianapolis. I was the only person that showed up with a laptop because I didn't know how to use CDJs very well at all. And so they're like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is how I'm playing. I'm using my APC-40 and a laptop." And they're just like, "Well, what do we plug you into?" Like they were all confused. I was like, "Really? Like this is a thing, really?"
Yeah.
And so we just plugged into the mixer. And like, oftentimes back-to-back sets, like you were saying, it's a matter of just fading out of one set straight into the other. You don't want to actually stop the vibe. You don't want the music to stop.
Yeah. For anyone out there listening who's primarily DJing in Ableton, it is just my opinion that like it's really helpful to learn CDJs, just because at some point you might get booked at a club where like they don't really want you to bring your own laptop and have like a fancier setup. And
take it from me. It's true.
Yeah, and as far as projects go, right now I'm actually focusing a little bit more on Max for Live. That is a technology that I've tried to not learn for the longest time because Max is this visual programming language.
Sure.
I think for a lot of people who come from, like traditional text-based programming, we look at it and we're like, oh, this is all visual and you have to like click things. That doesn't seem very efficient or fun to do. So for the last few years, I was like, I'm not going to even like bother to learn Max. But recently I found out you can just write this programming language called JavaScript in it, which I know pretty well. So I did some of that.
So I didn't know that. I didn't know you could run JavaScript inside Max.
You can, yeah. There's so like everything in the live object model you can access from JavaScript using Max.
Very cool.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I just started diving into Max for Live. For anybody who's not super familiar, because there's a lot of people, all different experience levels listening. Max for Live, like you said, is a visual programming language, which eventually was created originally by a company called Cycling 74 that ended up becoming Ableton ended up partnering with them, and with the release of Ableton Live 10, now it comes bundled inside of Live Suite, and so it's included when you install Ableton Live, and it just allows you to create like your own custom effects and instruments and all types of different things to be able to have whatever end result you want to hack Ableton or to do different things. Which is, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, is how much have you done with Max for Live? I just started really getting into it recently.
Yeah, same. I only started getting into it. But
it's funny that you say that like you like the more text-based programming, because for me, I like the simple, easy drag and drop objects that it has for you. Makes it easy for people like me who don't know anything about Java or text-based anything.
Yeah, I have this problem. I have like the exact opposite problem that a lot of music people have. So I've talked to a lot of people who have seen these scripts I've written, and basically their question is like, how do I run this? Because there's no like easy drag and drop interface for like running a Python script. And so like I've been told, like, if you want anyone to be able to run this, you have to just like make it into a package or like make it into a VST where someone can just like click it and it runs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually like have a lot of trouble with like drag and drop interfaces. Like I don't find them intuitive.
Yeah.
And I have the same issue with YouTube videos. Like I've noticed every like music tutorial is a YouTube video, and for me, I just like learn much better if it's written down as text.
Okay.
So,
yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, just don't put a virus in it, because I feel like you're smart enough where you could like hack my computer right now without me knowing.
And so I actually like read a bunch about this morning because Max, I was just like wondering like what is it capable of? Could you like make a virus in Max?
Right.
And yeah, you totally can. Every time you load an untrusted Max patch from some random website, it's you could definitely get a virus that way.
Yeah, I was talking to my friend actually earlier today about that. He works in IT, and he was talking to me about that. And there was one Max for Live device where you open it and it automatically searches. It does a Google search for cute puppies. So the moment you run it, it just like searches for cute puppies on YouTube and on Google.
Does it show it to you in Ableton or something?
No, it just opens your browser and just does it right there. Which is kind of funny. So yeah, I guess there's like endless possibilities.
Yeah, I think someone wrote a Max patch that just like restarts your computer or something.
You could totally mess with people. You could have a lot of fun with this. You could be doing all kinds of stuff. You could just like do a Max patch that goes straight to your Spotify and just like automatically hits follow or something, and just market it as something else. Be like,
yeah, just like hide like a follow button.
Yeah,
in there.
It'd be a good idea. Cool. Yeah,
I
think we're onto something here.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised more people don't do this who like make Max patches or even VSTs. I think you could do all of these things in like a VST as well.
Yeah, I think most Max for Live developers are white hat type of people.
Yeah.
Doing good for the community of music. This next episode is number 47 with JJ Bird. He's done a lot of interesting work with source separation technology, and he also has created some really cool Max for Live devices that you might want to check out. So if you want to learn more about him and what he's done, check out the link in the show notes. Also, a fun fact, as I was listening through this episode, you can hear geese outside of my apartment honking throughout the entire episode. So if you've been with the podcast for a while, you know how much I hate geese because of them constantly surrounding my apartment. So this was a fun flashback for me. I did my best to get it out with RX isotope, but there's only so much you can do. So if you're out there and you live next to a bunch of geese, I sympathize with you. And here's episode number 47 with JJ. Yeah.
So that's how I started into this world of music technology. I did research during my PhD on something called source separation, which is about unmixing instruments from mixtures, like removing a voice, removing a dialogue. Yeah. And after that, I ended up having a job in Paris, also in music research, at a place called IRCAM, which is a very exciting place to do music technology. So it's, for example, where the Max language was invented. So Max, which is
really
okay. Yeah, sure. Awesome. So back in the 80s, it was invented there. Then it was developed by a company, and then it was
74, right?
Exactly.
Did they pick up that technology from IRCAM then?
Yes. So the guy who started Cycling 74 was collaborating at IRCAM with the guy who invented Max.
Oh, cool. It's a good history lesson. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Nice. And so afterwards, after a couple of years there at IRCAM, I decided to go independent. And right now, since several years, I'm dedicated to helping musicians and small companies, discover the cool possibilities that machine learning offer to the music applications in general.
Yeah. So, I mean, we are going to talk a lot about machine learning. I want to pick your brain more on that topic in a lot of different areas. But For the listeners on this podcast who are like not really sure what that even means, like how would you define machine learning in music?
So machine learning in general is a set of methods that allow computers to extract patterns from data, right? So it doesn't sound very science fiction like that, but it's really what it is, right? So it's a set of computer programs, if you want, or of algorithms. An algorithm it's just a method or a program. It's nothing more like that. So it's a set of programs that reads a series of data stored in a computer and derives or extracts patterns from that data. So, for example, in the music case, you will have a collection of songs stored in your hard disk, and there is an algorithm that will load all of these songs and that will analyze the songs. Like it will extract how fast is the song, or how the overall frequency content, what kind of melody it contains, what kind of instruments. So information that is a bit tricky to extract automatically. That's part of the challenge. But once the program has gone through the data, it starts comparing all the information that it has extracted from all the data. It derives common things. Like, for example, okay, I see that in this database that you have, like half of the songs have a very harsh sound, and the other half has a more soft sound. So maybe this is more like rock, and this is more like classical music. So this is a simple example, but this is just what it is. It's an automatic extraction of patterns from data. And in the particular case of music, it's from sound and music data.
Yeah. And your Factor synth, I feel like, is a good example of that. It's a Max for Live device you released not too long ago, and it can be a little overwhelming for anybody who opens it the first time. There's a lot you can do inside of it. It's kind of a beast of a device, but it was really cool. I mean, I was playing with it. You can just drag and drop an audio clip straight into it, and it basically creates all these different randomized patterns that you can generate to play back that audio and chop it up. But also you can do some source separation where you could basically mute the kick drum. Say if you dragged a master file into there of an entire song that's already compressed, it can kind of deconstruct the material and the different instruments already in that clip, which is interesting. I think probably my favorite Max toy that you created was Factoid. I love that thing. I was playing with that this morning. It's real simple, real user friendly. And you can just drag a drum loop or any audio clip into it and chop it up and get some really interesting results. Yes, and that's your newest Max device that you've released, right?
Yeah,
you talk about that?
Right. So that came out like 3 weeks ago, I think. And after releasing Factor Synth, which was about 1.5 years already, I've been talking with many users. Then they have been given me great ideas and feedback how to improve mostly the workflow, because that is the thing that is most surprising, as you told me. So there is suddenly this new way of of displaying audio as a set of components.
Yeah.
And then there is also the let's say unusual way of interacting with Ableton Live. You have to click on the clip, and the workflow can be a bit simpler and a bit better. So I had the idea to take the basic idea or the basic concept of decomposing the sound, but make it a much more lightweight and easy to use device. And that's what Factoid is. So it's actually based on exactly the same decomposition methods. It's also matrix factorization. It's the same code that does the decomposition. But the application is different. So instead of putting or creating a display of a lot of sound material and elements at your disposal to modify, recombine manually, etc., no, what it does is it creates the elements, but then it randomizes them in time. So it shifts them backwards or forwards, which is something that Factor Synth cannot do actually. And it quantizes it to the beat or to the rhythm. So when you have a loop, what it does, it creates random rhythmic variations using the components. So it's a fun way of starting to to see what this kind of decomposition things can do for you with very few manipulations. You drag the clip on the device, you click on randomize, and it starts generating rhythmic variations. Of course, you have less control on that than with Factor Synth, but I think it's a fun entry into this concept of factorizing sounds.
Yeah. And I would say for a lot of music producers out there, less is more. You know, sometimes when you have too much creative control, it's easy to get lost in the details and you actually stop making music because you're spending the whole time just playing with buttons rather than actually making music at some point.
That's true. That's definitely true.
So what is the future of machine learning with music? I know that's a big loaded question, but you know, where is all of this research and everything you've seen behind the scenes as far as making these tools and devices for producers? You know, where do you see machine learning, you know, say down the road 10, 20, 30 years? You know, what is that
well, that's a big one. Yeah. Well, let's start with the more realistic things, and then maybe we can talk about more fantasy stuff. But I think in the next years, for example, talking specifically about this decomposition into components. Right now, as you have maybe noticed in Factor Synth and Factoid, you can get cool components from sounds, interesting stuff, interesting elements, but they are often a bit unpredictable. So you know for sure that you will get a hi-hat sometimes, and you will get a note somewhere there.
Yeah.
But you never know exactly what you're going to get, right?
Right.
So there is some research to be done in the sense that you need to understand better what these algorithms are able to extract. And you need also to understand better the connection between the parameters you choose for the decomposition. Like there's not many parameters, but there is the number of components and a couple of other parameters that right now is more of a trial and error. And what would be cool is to have more deeper understanding on how these parameters affect what you will get at the end. So that is one thing, a bit more doing them more predictable. Another obvious thing that will undoubtedly improve in the next years will be the quality of the separation itself, of the resynthesis, because there is one part is the extraction into components, but then the other big part of the thing is that you want to regenerate it, you want to resynthesize it so that they can listen to the separate components, right?
Yeah.
And so right now there's still some artifacts or some leakage in the sense of source separation between the instruments, but also in the sense of components between, for example, in Factoid, between the hi-hat and the drums. So this, I think we are gonna find some tricks to improve this kind of thing. So this is the more realistic things that I think will gonna happen. And then more in the long term, I mean, you know, it's such a huge field. So it's machine learning, it's artificial intelligence, which is still more general. So machine learning is a small part of artificial intelligence, which is the broadest topic, right?
Right.
And
Terminator, the movie, you know, takes over.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. It's
Ableton grows arms and legs and comes out of your computer and starts playing your guitar.
That's the image that you think about. And when you hear artificial intelligence, most of the time, when you hear artificial intelligence, most of the time it's just machine learning. But it sounds more, you know, science fiction, and sometimes a bit more scary. So. It's true, and of course I'm not even talking about, you know, machines that will have consciousness and these kind of things, but a bit more in the long term are things like they exist already, but they're gonna be there's gonna be an explosion, I'm sure. So the things in artificial intelligence that, for example, they generate music by themselves and they compose. This is a little bit different. This is a bit beyond machine learning. Machine learning, it generates the elements, the patterns, and then you can do with them whatever you want. That's the Factor Synth or Factor. That's really pure machine learning. But then a step more beyond towards artificial intelligence will be something like a machine that can imitate your style, that can generate the music that keeps learning with time. This already exists, but I think it's still a bit far from being, of course, undistinguishable or a very, very good quality compared with a human composition.
Do you know companies that are already trying to achieve that right now?
So I know there is research going on by Spotify. This time it's Spotify for sure.
Sure.
They have
algorithms, right? Like, would that be part of like the Discover Weekly playlist, or how they're referring new song preferences? Or
to be honest, I'm not sure how they plan to use it in their product line, or if they want to use it at all. Right now, they have a very interesting research center here in Paris, Spotify, and they do this kind of forward-thinking research in music technology to generate progress and generate IP. But I don't know how they plan to build it in Spotify. Maybe the goal is to generate playlist that is not really the playlist that is generated, but the music itself according to your taste or to your style. So you play a favorite song, and then you get 3 hours of generated music that resembles this song, and each time this music is a little bit different, and only you are hearing this music for the first and the last time. These kind of things,
Yeah. That's wild to think about.
Sure. For the moment, I'm more interested in approaches that really doesn't take too many creative decisions away from you. So things that allow you to get some sound material to work with, some like timbral, spectral material, and then you can use it as a new kind of collection of sounds or of timbres to do your composition. That's the thing that currently interests me most.
Yeah. Last but not least, we have episode number 48 with my friend Deza. That's her producer name. Her real name is Danielle Thwaites. Yeah, shout out to her for this episode number 48. She talks about a lot of good random stuff. So here it is. And as we both learned in our certification for the world, I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before. For all the listeners out there who don't know, Ableton is the company, Live is the software. So if you want to be on the inside scoop and sound really smart, it's always Ableton Live for the software, or just Live, because Berlin is super hardcore about that. So let the world know. Yes. Now the world is aware. Always Ableton Live. Yes. Exactly. Or Live. Anyway, not to cut you off, but that's so now you have a project. You did school, you did lynda.com, a lot of self-teaching, a lot of self-exploring. You eventually were able to do some Ableton Live playback with Imogen Heap.
Yeah, that chick. She's pretty dope.
Yeah, she is super dope. She's doing a lot of really cool things in music tech, and her music's great too. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it was great working with her because she is such a pioneer and a force to be reckoned with. A mutual friend was doing live sound and had met Imogen and couldn't do the dates, so I kind of got pulled into the tour for her North American tour, and that was a really incredible time. It was my first tour ever.
How long ago was this?
This was last May.
Okay, that's pretty recent.
Yeah, it was. Awesome. I learned so much from her and just working with the other females on the tour. It was an all-female tour besides two of the band members, which was such an incredible vibe. And what was even better about that was it wasn't purposely for only females. It was just what it was. And that was really, really comforting. But I've worked with a lot of other artists to build their live sets and to get them ready for gigging. And that's been really fun. I really got into that because of lynda.com, actually. St. Vincent's musical director had put up a video on how he runs St. Vincent's live set. And that completely blew my mind of what Ableton Live was capable of doing and how I could push that. Yeah. And the rest is kind of history. It just became my favorite thing to do, was programming live sets.
Yeah.
I've been producing music under the moniker Deza since 2017. And I mean, it's just been really fun. I produce most of the tracks myself. I mean, all of them myself. And I have a couple of people come in to help me as a co-write. And it's just been, it's been such a great way to express myself because I'm in control of every aspect of the sound. It was really nice from coming from a band background where I was able to really jam with people. But I can still do that to a degree. I'll have a full song and I'll program the drums, but maybe I send it out to a friend of mine who plays drums and have them add some real cymbals, add some real kicks, maybe just layer what I've already done, or be like, I don't like any of these sounds. Can you just like play the gist of this, but on your kit? Yeah. And I'm able to collaborate in a way that I really wasn't able to when I was kind of stuck in a huge room with a bunch of people and we had to come up with something on the spot. It's a little bit more meditative now.
Yeah, totally. Collaborating with people, the right people, I think is really important too. I used to try to do a lot of remote collaboration, and I find that now just being in the room with somebody is so much better. Like just feeling that energy and being able to work with them and bounce ideas off of people who complement your weaknesses. And so like you play with a drummer now, right? So it's you and a drummer?
It's me and a drummer and a keyboardist, and the keyboardist is my co-writing buddy, if you will. And he sings a lot of background vocals on some of the tracks that I have out. But the big project has been working with this drummer. I wanted him to have a hybrid kit. I wanted him to be standing. So that was really difficult. And I also wanted the kick drum to be flipped and upright so that I could hit it too with sticks. Nice. And we have triggers on it. So it took probably about 4 months of just conceptualizing what it is and how we were going to get it done. So at this point, we've got 2 computers that we're live linking, and we're both going into the same type, but different interfaces, and we're outputting out. He's taking care of all the drums, all of the percussion, and so we've got nice stems for that. And then I'm taking care of vocals and synths and bass, and the keyboardist as well.
Is there any new tech or gear that you've learned from him, or just teaching in general, or anything new that's coming out that you think is like cool or interesting?
What I've been really turned on to lately is Genki Instruments has this ring. They call it the Wave, and it's a Bluetooth ring that will send an X, Y, and rotation message that you can map to anything. So I've been implementing that in my live show. It also has tap or trigger. So for when I first saw the device at NAMM, I totally knew what songs I wanted to use this on. I was so inspired by it. So now for one of my tracks during the verse, I will sing, but I can actually get away from my setup and play the kick by just tapping myself, or I'll tap the mic stand, or I'll tap someone in the audience. And it's really cool. And I've also done vocal effects where if I move, similar to how Imogen's gloves work, but way, way less sophisticated. If I sway my arm up to the right, I can, send my vocals to reverb. I can move my hand up and get delay.
That's awesome.
And I'll also do that with guitar effects as well. And it's kind of my new party trick.
Yeah. Is it pretty easy to map?
Super easy to map.
Mapping? Okay.
Yeah, they have their own software called SoftWave, and within it there's even a soft synth that you can plug into and immediately start making music.
It has its built-in own preset sounds inside of it. Okay. That's pretty tight. I have to check that out.
They're really cool. I mean,
my Ableton Live teacher, when I was at DubSpot 8 years ago, he was like talking about a similar thing. Just drop in a track that you love, and then create locators and chop it up into like verse, chorus, bridge, or whatever, and start dissecting the song that way. And then listening to the different elements like of the drums and the rhythm and everything in those different parts and what is being extracted and like added.
Totally. And I think to add on to that, doing sound alikes. If you take a song that you really, really like and figure out what they did and how you can create your sounds to be like that. Like, how do I make my bell sound like Diplo's bell? Like, Diplo has the best bell in this track.
Diplo has the best bells.
It's just so nice. And so by doing that, you're learning a lot about sound design. You're learning a lot about production. You're learning a lot about arrangement. And you can use those tracks that you do that you really love, these sound-alikes, as covers in a live performance, especially when you're just getting started. It's really nice to have a cover or two to kind of pull interest for the crowd. And if it's a song that you really like, it's all the better.
Yeah, that's true. Big thanks to all these guests joining the podcast. Much love to all of you out there listening. If you want to be the first to get new episodes, join the newsletter and I will send you cool stuff. Just go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter and I will see you in the next episode. Later.